So this is part of the process. Once you've done the research, you have a great resume, the recruiter reaches out to you, and now you get this chance to sell yourself. So do your research, guys. Like, I feel like as a recruiter, something that is a pet peeve of mine is when I talk to someone and they're like, who is this again? What company is this for? You look so unorganized, and it just isn't set up, a good, like, I'm not looking forward to this conversation. And I really don't want to also spend a lot of my time talking about the company and the role, because you should have already done that part. The 30 usually is a 30-minute slot. I want to be able to answer all of your questions in that 30 minutes. Everything else that you could have done like beforehand, like do beforehand. Make the most of your time that you have, scheduled with this person. So do your research before you do the interview. Show them that you're interested, that you've been following them, that you know things about the company. So I think I put an example here. Sometimes, I'll have somebody say, oh, congratulations on your last round of funding, or I love, the new product feature that you released, back in May or whatever. It shows that you are interested, right? And that you're a fan and that you're a potential customer. And all of these things are, I think, will help you. Something that we also do in the phone interview too is we try to do a lot of the vetting before you get to the hiring manager. And so once you understand what the job description is, what they're looking for, be ready to share examples. When it comes to like metrics or like how you contributed to the company or the team, have accomplishments ready to share. I'm pretty sure you guys have all done amazing things and, contribute in all these ways. But like write them all down and memorize them so that when these things come up, you can easily remember, like these anecdotes, examples, or whatever. What else? If you don't have an example, be ready to talk about how you would, tackle something. So I think that's a great way to kind of like, if you are transitioning, right? Like, let's say I've heard before you're transitioning from project manager to product manager. So if you haven't had a lot of that PM experience, that product manager experience, be ready to give examples of the crossover experience, right? And how I've solved these problems and how I've worked with engineering before and so forth and so forth. Keep your answers short and to the point. Don't ramble. I know that you guys get nervous and you guys start rambling, but again, you got to think about you only have this 30 minutes to sell yourself. So try to keep to the point. Allow the recruiter to ask you the questions they need to ask you.
Actually, speaking about it, I just got a question for you. Yeah. When they ask you to go through your previous work experience, how, I know you mentioned 7 years, sort of how far back should you really go? I've been in the industry for 15, 16 years. So I wasn't sure how far back is far back enough.
So I would say rule of thumb is 7 years.
Okay. Thank you.
So another thing is that I like to see is people being very thoughtful with their answers, and they don't just jump into answering. I like it when people take a minute. It's okay to take a minute and say, let me think about that. So, and then, that way you can articulate better and you can give them the best example that you could think of. So relax, be confident, and you'll do well there. Also very important, at the very end of the phone interview, I always like to see that candidates are genuinely interested. And the way that you can show that is by asking questions. So you've already done the research beforehand. What is it that hasn't already been explained in the job description the company website, Google, what is it that you're dying to know that, that hasn't been already put out there? I think, as a recruiter, I think that I love to see genuine interest, right? And I don't think there's any bad questions, but I think some of the best questions is targeted towards like your job. So how is success measured at your company? Do you guys have KPIs or OKRs and things like that? How am I able to grow in this role? Or how has growth worked in that company before? How does your team work? How do they communicate? Things like that. What are the immediate goals of this role? As a recruiter, I always try to understand, what do you need me to do within the first 30 days, 60 days, 90 days? It's always good to understand what is your immediate contribution versus long-term contribution. And if they tell me, well, you need to do this and this and this now and do this and this later, let's say for the long term, I don't want to do X, Y, and Z later. I think you can already kind of like pull yourself out of a role that you will potentially not be satisfied with. So it's really important to have those questions. And also,
Susan, 5 minutes.
Sure. So I think it's important to understand what each company's interview process is as well, because you are organizing and trying to understand how long the process is. So let's say you're applying to multiple companies, and you want to be ready to know, like, is this going to be an 8-week process? Is this going to be a 2-month process? And so if you do get an offer from one of the companies, but yet there's another company that you want to go for, but their process is a little bit longer, understanding these interview processes will help you make that decision, right? So do ask about the process.